Welcome to the Calm Analytics channel. This is Boris Izangozin with you. Today is May 29th. Here are the main news stories at this moment. An emergency incident in Romania. A Russian drone struck a residential apartment building. This happened in the city of Galati, which is in eastern Romania. 2 people were injured, including a 14-year-old teenager. 70 residents were evacuated from the building, and traffic in the area has been cordoned off. Before the arrival of this drone, the armed forces of Ukraine reported that a group of Russian drones was approaching the city of Reni, which is in the Odessa region. The distance from Reni to Galati in a straight line is 20 kilometers. Romanian bomb disposal experts have already reported that the warhead of this drone fully detonated upon hitting the house. I looked at the statistics. This is already the 28th case of Russian drones violating Romanian airspace. But this is the first time a house has been hit. With each incident, Russia is escalating the intensity of its hybrid attacks. Now, of course, the Russians will say that it wasn't intentional, that it was Ukrainian electronic warfare or something like that, just like they said when 20 Russian drones ended up in Poland. But that's not the point. What they say now doesn't matter. Russia is constantly raising the stakes, little by little. Fighter jets approaching NATO borders, violations of airspace, sabotage at post offices, incidents on the railways. All of these are parts of Russia's hybrid war. Damage to undersea cables in the Baltic Sea, migration attacks through Belarus, missiles and drones flying through the airspace of NATO countries. Just think about that for a second. And Romania is a member of the North Atlantic Alliance. And now the Russians have already resorted to drone strikes on residential buildings. Each new incident seems a bit more serious than the last, and in this way, Russia is testing the limits of what is permissible. Aha! Now NATO is calling an emergency meeting. If that's all that happens, then it means they can keep going further. And now here's a bonus question. What do you think? Was it a coincidence that several of these things happened at the same time? The escalation of threats from Russia, the attempt to intimidate European and American diplomats with strikes on Kyiv, the attack with 2 Oreshnik drones, the attempted attack with 2 Oreshnik drones on Ukraine, and the strike on a residential building in a NATO country? Was it just by chance that all these events coincided like this? It is absolutely clear that Russia has now moved up another step on the escalation ladder. And the Kremlin's court political scientist Karaganov, yes, there is such a person, is the author of the escalation ladder theory. All of this is according to his theory. And the main question is, how will NATO respond? If once again it's all just, well, yes, we're concerned and so on, then unfortunately the next step will already involve lethal casualties. By the way, Russia is not testing red lines right now. Many people say it's testing red lines or not red lines. Russia is testing their absence. And here, without any mockery towards the alliance countries, if there isn't a maximally tough response right now, if you don't want to strike yourselves, at least give Ukraine the means to strike. Ukraine will do it. Believe me, it will hit Russia hard and will even thank you for it. Red lines in general imply that they exist after 28 violations of airspace, after 20 drones in Poland, after debris on Romanian farms before this, and now after a warhead that detonated right inside a house. What lines are we even talking about? Do these lines even exist at all? NATO hasn't defined any lines. Every time, unfortunately, there was an explanation for why this particular incident didn't require a response. They say it's not intentional, they always find some justification for why they shouldn't respond harshly to Russia. By the way, friends, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. We're fighting Putin's propaganda here. Let's do it together. And let me remind you of an important detail. Those who subscribe to the Calm Analytics channel will have soft and silky hair. And here's some wonderful news. The main intelligence directorate of Ukraine reports the occupiers' corridor Crimea-Donetsk is finished. Sections of the highway between temporarily occupied Berdyansk, Melitopol and Jankoy are under the fire control of Ukrainian military intelligence operators. Every day, Ukrainian drones burn dozens of military trucks, fuel tankers, and all sorts of other Russian military equipment there. Let's watch this very informative video.
Повітряна тривога, лети до Таганрога, дістань до Волгограда, Саратов потруси, нехай гримить в Тамбові, Рязані та Ростові, як до Москви дістанешся, то нахуй рознеси. Дехто каже, що це гріх і так не треба, гнів та розпач можуть карму зіпсувати. Бачу сльози, чути стогін аж до неба. За це все к***и мають поздихать. Повітряна тривога, лети до Таганрога, влупи як слід Вороніж і Курском закуси.
Beautiful. The land corridor to Crimea no longer exists. Or rather, it does exist, but trying to get through it is real Russian roulette. And here it's very appropriate to remind Russians that it's only going to get worse. Logistics problems are growing. You can't fight without fuel. And all efforts are being made to cut off logistics for the southern group of ghouls. And let me also remind you that the Russians fled from Kherson precisely when they realized their logistics could be cut off. That's why the Z military bloggers threw a real tantrum. Today I read something that was just sweet as honey. 150,000 people, well, that's what they call people, but in reality these are ghouls, bio-trash who came to kill Ukrainians. 150,000 people risk being left without supplies, according to the Z military bloggers. The collapse of logistics due to Ukrainian drones, the expansion of the strike zone of Ukrainian drones hitting the rear of the Russian army, has brought the supply of Russian forces in Zaporizhzhia, Kherson, and Donbass to the brink of paralysis, the military bloggers complain. Well, you know, the most important thing here is that the Russians can't do anything about it, and the number and depth of strikes are only increasing. The Russians are simply watching now as the highways empty out, their trucks and fuel tankers burn. Watch, Russians, just watch. And today we have a very thematic fundraiser. Let me remind you, in every episode we have an important fundraiser for the Ukrainian Defense Forces. And today we are continuing a major fundraiser for vehicles for the Active Operations Unit of the Main Intelligence Directorate, the FERRATA unit. This unit specializes in complex and multi-level tasks. And FERRATA are professionals in the use of drones, both aerial and maritime. The fighters have recorded a video message for you. Please watch.
Підрозділ активних дій ГУРМО «ФЕРРАТА» дякую Борису Тізенгаузену та його підписникам за допомогу, яку ви надаєте Збройним силам. І просить вас про підтримку наших зборів на автомобілі. Автомобілі – це важливо на фронті, це евакуація, це логістична підтримка наших підрозділів, це підвоз БК, провізії та дронів нашим хлопцям, які стримують ворога на фронті. Просимо вас підтримати наші збори. Цінуємо вашу підтримку і допомогу. Слава Україні! Героям слава!
Let's help the fighters from the FERRATA unit. These are the very people who will soon cut off the southern Russian group from their logistics. The link to donate is in the description of this video. There are Mono and PayPal options for those who want to help from abroad. If you're watching on another channel, there's always a QR code that leads to the donation page. In every episode, I thank you so much, friends, for supporting Ukraine and helping our defenders. Together, we are a great force. Thank you so much. And now news about Putin's terrible revenge. By the way, I don't know if you can hear Siegfried snoring. Siegfried is my wonderful dog. The thing is, Siegfried turns 9 years old today. Let me show him to you. He hasn't been on camera for a while. Just a second. Up you go. Oh, ho, ho, ho. Here he is, Siegfried. Say hello. Up you go. Siegfried went back to sleep. Honestly, I wish I had that skill. I don't know. He just lies down and falls asleep in a second. Where can you level up a skill like that? News about Putin's terrible revenge against Armenian Prime Minister Pashinyan. So now this revenge has been finalized because Armenia chose a Western course. Russia will restrict the import not only of tomatoes but also cucumbers, peppers, leafy greens, and even strawberries starting May 30th. This was reported by Rosokoznadzor. Take that, Pashinyan, that's the kind of revenge you get. Putin, the tomato terrorist and strawberry abuser, such a nasty, sniveling troublemaker who just can't accept that people simply don't want to deal with him. Not because there's something wrong with Armenia, Moldova, or Azerbaijan, but simply because he's Putin, a lost cause. Do you understand? That's all there is to it. A simple explanation. For 25 years, Putin kept the post-Soviet space on a leash with gas markets, passports, and just plain threats. One by one, these hooks are being pulled out, and it turns out there's absolutely nothing behind them, just Rosokoznadzor and Putin's resentment. And Ukraine showed the whole world Putin's true face. as if he was reflected in a mirror. A cowardly, vile, thieving, deceitful, Botoxed old man who is trying to mold some kind of great victory out of the contents of his own suitcase. That's all Putin has left now, to drearily read these worn-out phrases from cards, his jaw constantly slipping. Well, here's another piece of news on the topic. Latvia has started installing so-called dragon's teeth on the border with Russia. Good for them. And do you know how these actions, and in general the actions of other neighbors, are interpreted in Russia? That all of this, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Finland, they're doing it because they're so aggressive and want to attack Russia. Russia is under siege. Everyone there thinks the whole world wants to attack Russia. See, all of Europe is arming itself, so that must mean they want to attack. Apparently, Europe has no other problems. They absolutely have to attack the Russian Federation, leave the Netherlands, their own countries, sunny Italy, the French Riviera, and go conquer Sizran in Russia and just live there. We won't give it up, we won't allow it, cries the toothless deep country Russian. We won't give up our Sizran. By the way, about the disgraceful forum in Kazakhstan. Besides Putin, Lukashenko also flew in there. The entire ghoulish Politburo is gathered. You know, the most cringeworthy thing is when these two senile old men start talking about artificial intelligence. Putin doesn't use the internet at all. Lukashenko lives in some kind of Soviet simulation. So Lukashenko arrived at this forum in Kazakhstan and started talking about artificial intelligence. Tsar Klubny was spouting some absolute nonsense, just utter madness. And you know what he said? I didn't give the definition of what informatics is at the beginning of my speech for nothing. That's how he began his speech about artificial intelligence. This isn't a joke. You can find his full speech and watch it yourself. I just don't want to waste your time here. I mean, it's a good thing Lukashenko didn't start talking about cybernetics or punch cards too. Basically, Lukashenko's speech sounded like something you'd hear from someone sitting on a bench outside an apartment building. Oh, what's the big deal with your artificial intelligence anyway? How is it supposed to replace people? You can't replace the soul. And how are your robots going to dig up potatoes, huh? That's pretty much what it sounded like. They come up with artificial intelligence, but back in my day, we did everything with our own hands at the factory, cleaned out the cow sheds. Once again, I'm convinced that the old men clinging to power with their blue-knuckled fingers bring nothing good to the world. Today, Ukrainian long-range drones attacked two important facilities of the Russian oil industry at once, the Yaroslavl-Tyry oil pumping station. It's the third time recently that Yaroslavl-Tyry has been hit, one of the key nodes of the main Surgut-Polotsk oil pipeline. Through this node, oil from Siberia is transported to the Baltic ports of Ust-Luga and Primorsk. And it also goes to Belarus. So it's an important node, 800 kilometers from the Ukrainian border, not a distance at all for Ukrainian drones. And today, the port of Temryuk in the Krasnodar region was on fire. It's also a crucial element of the Russian Federation's export infrastructure. Through it pass petroleum products, petrochemicals, and various cargoes for southern export routes. In short, Ukrainian drones are hitting so hard, it's enough to make your head spin. Another piece of news that might seem ordinary, but it could have very serious consequences for Russia. Large businesses in Russia have officially been granted the right to purchase anti-aircraft artillery, machine guns, and turrets to defend themselves against drone attacks. Putin, of course, is a truly unique charlatan. He started the war, but when it comes to drones, big business is kindly asked to defend itself at its own expense. Go ahead and buy artillery, go ahead. But when it comes to keeping the war going, that's when Russians have to tighten their belts and face higher taxes. So he started the war with a handful of fellow KGB men. He didn't ask anyone at all, not big business, not the Russian people. But as soon as something happens, you're kindly asked to pay for all of Putin's mess. But, you know, there's another layer to this whole story with big business and anti-aircraft systems. Allowing businesses to arm themselves isn't just an admission of Putin's helplessness, like, I can't handle it, the army is busy, so you take care of it yourselves. It's the creation of a precedent. In Russia, where private ownership of weapons is very strictly limited, essentially armed non-governmental organizations with official status are now appearing. Today it's turrets at factories, but tomorrow the question will be, whose interests will all these turrets and private military companies be protecting? The whole world has already seen how a single Russian PMC, Wagner, nearly captured the Kremlin. And not one as in masculine, but one as in feminine, because it's a private military company. And at that time, when Prigozhin was marching on Moscow, Putin and Medvedev were just wide-eyed, fleeing somewhere beyond the Urals on their jets. Putin was there, I don't know, he looked pale, almost green when he spoke. "I'm not afraid," Putin shouted from his bunker. And another important piece of news. Today, drones attacked 3 Russia-linked tankers off the coast of Turkey. The hunt has started again. It's clear that the crew was unharmed. The tankers were, coming from Russia. All these tankers were under British sanctions. Moreover, 2 out of these 3 tankers were attacked right at the moment they were transferring oil at sea. In other words, this is the classic scheme Russia uses to circumvent sanctions when oil is transferred from one ship to another. Well, these tankers were attacked by maritime drones. I'm curious, when Putin attacked Ukraine, when the Black Sea Fleet was still stationed in Crimea, and the flagship, the cruiser Moskva, had not yet sunk, and the Black Sea Fleet headquarters in Sevastopol had not yet been destroyed by missiles, at that very time, Putin believed in dominance over the Black Sea, in Russia's invincibility. Could the underground heel have imagined back then that the moment would come when Ukraine, which doesn't even have its own navy, would force his Black Sea Fleet to hide in disgrace in Novorossiysk? Or rather, the part of the Black Sea Fleet that remains. I think that if, before the invasion, someone had told Putin about this scenario, that he would have no fleet, that it would be skulking somewhere in the bays of Novorossiysk, Putin simply wouldn't have believed it. He would have just laughed with his disgusting, creaky laugh of an old pervert. But now he has no choice but to believe it. And for today's episode, I specifically included a news story as an example to show that all information, even what you read from reputable sources, absolutely needs to be verified. Unfortunately, some of our media and bloggers picked up this story, and it started spreading in the context of, oh, the US is easing sanctions against Russia, everything is lost, betrayal, and so on. Putin and Trump are back on friendly terms. Russians are spreading this news as if it's their victory. Well, the original headline goes like this: the US has lifted anti-Russian sanctions from 11 individuals and 2 tankers, according to data from the US Treasury. Among them are former State Duma Deputy Artur Chilingarov, former Federation Council Senators Leonid Lebedev and Elena Sakharova, as well as the tankers Linda and Lady D. And then it started. Panic, betrayal. So I turned on my inner skeptic and double-checked what actually happened. In total, as part of this initiative, sanctions were lifted from 76 individuals and various entities. We're talking about deceased individuals and decommissioned or non-operational vessels. So specifically regarding this news item, Artur Chilingarov, the senator, died in 2024, Vladimir Lebedev in 2023, and Tatiana Sakharova in 2025. In fact, in the original version, both Leonid and Elena, the names were also mixed up, taken from somewhere. And a separate detail regarding the tankers. The tanker Linda and Lady D are actually the same vessel, which simply changed its name and was decommissioned. That is essentially the register of sanctioned individuals, and tankers was updated, and those who died were simply removed from it. By the way, sanctions were also lifted from Igor Sechin's son, Ivan, who died in 2024. Let me remind you, Sechin Jr., Sechin himself is a close associate and accomplice of Putin. So his son died at the age of 35 in a mansion in the Europa 1 cottage settlement in Krasnogorsk near Moscow, where he lived under the name Yevgeny Anatolievich Panin. The information about the causes and circumstances of Sechin Jr.'s death is classified. I think that if sanctions were lifted from Putin for such a reason, the whole world would be happy. The whole world would be happy. Even people who don't drink would open champagne or whatever they could find and have a drink when he finally croaked. We will definitely have a drink, friends. But you take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones. Subscribe to this channel, don't forget. And let's help our fighters from the GUR FERRATA unit. The link to donate is in the description of this video. Have a peaceful day, everyone, and glory to Ukraine,